Supergirl would be a story focusing on Kara Zor-El as she becomes Metropolis' new defender after the death of Superman in Justice League, Tower of Babel. The film would feature Silver Banshee as the main villain, with Parasite and Livewire appearing as secondary antagonists. The Batman 4 would be an adaptation of Death in the Family. The film would finally give Bill Skarsgård's Joker his moment to shine, and would also feature Harley Quinn and Killer Croc as secondary antagonists. Jason Todd's Robin would also be introduced, and would ultimately be killed by the Joker in the film's tragic conclusion. Wonder Woman 3 would finally bring in Ares as the main villain, but would also feature appearances by the other Greek gods of the DC universe. Aquaman 3 would be similar to the Black Lion's version of Aquaman 3 in his video What If the DCEU Was As Well Structured as the MCU? Part 2, it would feature Cord Hax as the main villain, and would introduce Calderon's Aqualad. The Flash 3 would set up the Justice Society, as it would introduce Jay Garrick. This film would also feature Reverse Flash as the main villain, with the Turtle as a secondary antagonist. Green Arrow Season 3 would introduce Roy Harper as Speedy, and would feature Onomatopoeia as the main villain, with Brick as a secondary antagonist. Black Adam would be a much better version of the actual movie. First, this film would take place after The Flash 3, with Black Adam having been transported to Earth 2 in the post-credits scene of that movie. Secondly, Black Adam's redemption arc would be better executed as it would have been set up in Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil. Third, Jay Garrick would be a member of the JSA. Fourth, Dr. Fate's helmet would actually have the eyes like it does in the comics and he also wouldn't be killed off. And finally, fifth, Sabbac wouldn't die, and will return as a major antagonist later down the line. Blue and Gold Season 2 would introduce Rip Hunter as a major character, with him teaming up with Booster and Ted in order to take on Mr. Mind, who has evolved into his form from 52. Supernova would return as a secondary antagonist, but he'd ultimately be killed by Mr. Mind halfway through the season. Plastic Man Season 2 would introduce Ralph Dibny, aka the Elongated Man, with the main villain being Kite Man. Hell yeah. Quisp would also appear as a recurring villain, portrayed by Will Ferrell. New Gods would be a mini-series taking place prior to the events of the big crossover movie. It would focus on Orion, Mr. Miracle, and Big Barda, and would also include Highfather as a major character. Darkseid would be the main antagonist, alongside his various followers, including Darsword, Steppenwolf, Granny Goodness, and Kalibak. With that, now we have the first part of the Big 2 movie finale to the Darkseid saga, Justice League, Darkseid War. This film would bring together almost every hero introduced up to this point to take on Darkseid. However, they ultimately lose, and Darkseid ends up taking over the world, leading to a cliffhanger endings similar to Avengers: Infinity War.
Before we get to the second part of the Darkseid storyline, we would have two films in between. The first being the Suicide Squad. This film would blend elements of both of the Suicide Squad films. The lineup would be similar to the 2016 film lineup, but with King Shark instead of Killer Croc. Joker would also have a small role, but thankfully, it would be Bill Skarsgård and not Jared Leto. The main villains would still be Enchantress and Incubus. The other film would be Legion of Superheroes, of which the lineup would be Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad and Chameleon Boy. The film's main villain would be Mordru, and it would also see the revival of Superman, with the film leading into the finale of the Darkseid saga. Speaking of which,
Justice League Final Crisis would be the finale to the Darkseid saga. It would see Superman and the Legion of Superheroes traveling back to the present and assisting the surviving heroes in a quest to go back in time and find all of the mother boxes before Darkseid does, and then use the boxes to undo the effects of the anti-life equation. During the climax, we would have a big battle between Darkseid and his forces and all of the heroes, including the Justice League, the Legion of Superheroes, the Suicide Squad and even the Legion of Doom. Ultimately, Ted Kord sacrifices his life to kill Darkseid with a radium bullet, and Superman ends up locking up the mother boxes in the Fortress of Solitude so that they'll never fall into the wrong hands again. The two epilogue projects of Phase 4 would be a Justice Society miniseries, which would cut back and forth between their origins during World War II and the modern day where they have to take on the Injustice Society, and a second Teen Titans movie which would adapt the Under the Red Hood storyline and would also feature Hugo Strange and Man-Bat as secondary villains.